This is the all-new 2019 Volkswagen Touareg, and that's their take on a large luxury SUV. Volkswagen is looking to move into the premium space with this new model, and it's loaded with lots of tech and lots of new safety. Now, along with being a high-end family hauler, they reckon this thing is pretty good off-road. Now, that's all well and good, but how does it stack up against the #1 most popular model in the large SUV segment? Let me introduce to you an oldie but a goodie, the Toyota LandCruiser Prado. There's only one specification so far for the new Touareg, which is based on the MLB architecture shared with the Porsche Cayenne, Audi Q8 and even the Lamborghini Urus. It's called Launch Edition with a starting price of $89,990. That price has gone up since the previous model, but this one is loaded with specs. There's 4-zone climate control, heated, ventilated and massaging Savona leather seats, 20-inch alloys, matrix LED headlights, air suspension, adaptive dampers, active anti-roll bars and all of the latest and greatest safety and driver aids. Although the reef blue paint you see on this test car will set you back another $2,000. The Prado Kakadu is the all-you-can-eat variant of the range, with the only option being paint, a relative bargain at $600. For the $83,761 asking price, you get 3-zone climate control, KDSS with rear airbag suspension and bi-LED headlamps. There's hill descent control and multi-terrain select for the off-roaders, and this new optional specification loses some fuel capacity for an underslung spare. But this means you get a separate opening glass on the rear tailgate, which is now lighter and more streamlined. Being a top-spec Kakadu, this Prado doesn't miss out on too much on the interior. You've got lots of wood finish around the place, lots of leather, the seats are electric, everything, heated and ventilated too, and I've got to say they're pretty comfortable. Although the design, in comparison to that Touareg in particular, does come off looking a little bit like a 1990s taxi in terms of just the way it looks. The infotainment, typical Toyota, it's a little bit clunky, not the most intuitive system, no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, but hey, it does the job. A definite luxury in this Prado and a bit of a tradition for Toyota 4-wheel drives, the cooled center console works really well too. Luxury features continue in this second row. You've got a DVD player here up in the roof, these seats are heated, you've got your own climate control as well. Aside from that, it's very comfortable, very spacious, very practical. When you think about this being a full 7-seater, you can see why this is such a popular car for Australian families. The first thing that hits you when you jump into this Touareg is the screen setup. It's pretty amazing. It's an $8,000 option called InnoVision. Not a small amount of money, but this is not a small amount of screen. You've got 15 inches here and you've got 12 inches in front of you here as well. It looks amazing and it functions perfectly as well. Once you've torn your eyes away from these two big screens, you see this interior and it's still super impressive. You've got lots of nice little design details around the place, and just the way it looks, it's very modern, very suave. All this gloss black stuff will pick up fingerprints a fair bit, I suppose, if that's a problem. And the center console may be on the small side slightly, although you've got good storage here up the front and also on the door cards. In the back of the Touareg here, and I've got to say it feels a little bit more like a large station wagon than an SUV. It's got a fairly tapered roofline to it, eats into the airiness a little bit in comparison to that Prado. But as a passenger, you've got plenty of space, it's quite comfortable, it's got a bit of a luxury vibe to it as well. You might not see the USB points on first inspection, but they're hidden just down here below the dual zone climate control. Also for the parents, got a sunshade, that'll come in handy on those sunny days. The big omission against the Volkswagen in this test is that there is no 7-seat option, which could be an issue for some buyers. But at least the 2 rows you do have are spacious and comfortable, and the boot is big and flat. It's listed at 810 litres. The Touareg gets airbag suspension at all 4 corners, along with adaptive dampers and anti-roll bars. That means the spring rate, ride height, damping, steering and roll stiffness is all variable through the available driving modes. So depending on what you're doing and how you're feeling, you can choose between modes like auto, sport and off-road. I'm in comfort at the moment and it does smooth out the ride nicely. It handles bumps and rough surfaces really well. Throw it into sport and things do firm up and the steering is pretty nice. The new Touareg is bristling with new technology, all kinds of safety and convenience stuff, though I do find the lane keep assist is a little bit overbearing sometimes. I find that it wants to stay dead center in the middle of the lane, otherwise you get into a bit of a tug of war with the steering wheel and it does get a little bit annoying. Under the bonnet of the Touareg is a carryover V6 diesel, now making 190 kilowatts and 600 newton meters. That runs through an 8-speed gearbox to all 4 wheels. Listed economy for the V-dub is 6.7 litres per 100 Ks on the combined cycle. On paper, the engine specs do paint a pretty sorry picture for the Prado. This Touareg has substantially more power and torque, and I've got to say, when you're driving it, you can feel every single one of those. This feels much faster, much more responsive, but it's also quieter and more refined as well. And when you're paying over $80,000 for a big SUV, this engine in the Touareg does really stack up a lot better than the Prado. Since the petrol V6 got axed, your only choice of engine in the Prado is the 2.8 litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel. It makes 130 kilowatts and 450 newton meters. That runs through a full-time four-wheel drive system complete with low-range transfer case and lots of off-road technology, including locking centre and rear differentials. The listed fuel economy for this setup is 7 litres per 100 k's. KDSS stands for Kinetic Dynamic Suspension System. It's an Australian invention. It works by making your sway bars kind of variable, and it's a really good system. It means the Prado has really smooth suspension, but not at the expense of lots of body roll. So your car feels controlled but very comfortable over bumps. So while this car is an old design, it still rides really smoothly. The 2.8 litre diesel in this Prado is shared with the Hilux and Fortuner. It's not an overwhelmingly powerful engine, but I suppose it's got enough power most of the time. And it is reasonably refined as well. And this gearbox, quite a good unit. You never really catch it napping. It seems to pick the right gear most of the time. When you think about the kind of life this Prado will be living, cruising around town, picking up the kids, running the groceries, and doing a bit of adventuring on the weekend, you can see why the Prado is a popular car. It's not exactly outstanding in terms of performance, but it is comfortable, it does what it says on the box, and it's pretty painless to get around in. These cars do need to be a bit more than just a suburban runabout. They do need to have a bit of off-road capability, and a pretty popular pastime in Australia is a visit to the beach. So can these two cars handle beach driving? Let's find out. One thing to remember about this Touareg is it does share a bit under the skin with the V6 Amarok. Same engine, different state of tune, and similar gearbox too, so it does have a bit of off-road credential about it. And I've got to say, driving down this beach now, it's performing really well. The engine's got heaps of torque, which is really handy for soft sand like this. And off-road mode selected on the dials here, and you've got 2 settings for off-road air suspension, so you can get that belly up a bit. One of the main limiting factors for the Touareg is the wheel and tyre combination. They're quiet and grippy on-road, but they're a bit limited with traction and how much you can air down off-road. But for the light-duty kind of off-roading that the Touareg is cut out to do, they fit the bill nicely. But one sore point for those looking to do a bit of off-roading is the space saver spare and air compressor in the boot. It's not really good enough if you do get a flat or into other tyre trouble. Things don't always go to plan when you're off-road, and because we were being a bit conservative with our tyre pressures, we did get bogged at one stage. That's alright though, it's all part of the fun. And more importantly, we had the right gear on hand to get the car out and moving once again. The old LandCruiser Prado. Not much has changed with it over the years, but it kind of doesn't have to as well. It's always been a good off-road vehicle, and it's still the same today. It's handling this beach driving quite easily. It's not too much of a challenge, and it will probably handle much more challenging conditions easily as well. I've got to say though, this engine does get bogged down a little bit in the soft sand. I'd love to see this car with a bit more grunt under the bonnet. It'll probably make it a bit easier to drive off-road and a bit more enjoyable as well. That being said though, this Prado does have all those right basic ingredients for a four-wheel drive. Low range, rear locker, full-size spare, big fuel tank. You can option even more fuel as well with this car. So that means it's a rational choice for those people who want to build up a four-wheel drive touring vehicle and still have something that's quite comfortable, quite functional and practical during the week for the family duties. You probably don't need to be Einstein to figure out which is a better four-wheel drive vehicle out of these two. If you want to do something like remote area touring, throw on some accessories, do some harder tracks or that sort of thing, the Prado is your choice. This Kakadu is not cheap, but it's really loaded with a lot of features, but it's got that proper four-wheel drive hardware there. Rear locker, low range, and that sort of thing. Multi-terrain select is pretty cool. I have to say though, this Touareg has performed really well on the beach today. If you're looking to do something like this every now and then, travel on the beach, head into the forest, do some tracks, this thing is much more capable than your basic soft road vehicle. So while the Prado is the better four-wheel drive, this Touareg is undoubtedly the best vehicle out of the two.